of you that for those of you that are not that familiar with us and with me, my name is Ivan Kravtsov. I'm a senior OSINT analyst at SocialLinks. We develop sophisticated, excellent open source intelligence software, and we also offer professional services in terms of training and investigations on demand. Today, we will be exploring the topic of data leaks and how to leverage them in your day-to-day investigations or any type of investigative and intelligence work that your organization might be doing. Before we go into that specifically, we will highlight our understanding, as SocialLinks, of intelligence logic. So first, we need to give definitions. We split the definitions of data, information, and intelligence. So data, we understand it as something that is raw and unstructured. For example, a large spreadsheet with IP addresses or with phone numbers and call logs. Information is the result of the initial filtering and structuring of that data, and intelligence is the analytical product after dissecting and analyzing the produced information. The scope of intelligence can be operational, tactical, and strategic, with levels of complexity and the case becoming a more multi-component type of case increasing from the left to the right. Purposes: general planning, mitigation, preventing something from happening, or remediation, working with the consequences of something that has happened. Within the process, we might have sequences, so something which we repeat a lot. We might have workflows that are comprised of one and more sequences. And we have tasks that are comprised of one or more workflows. All of those should ideally adhere to an intelligence requirement, meaning the specific gap of knowledge that needs to be addressed to enable further action. And all of that is within the logic of the intelligence cycle, where everything is started with planning and direction, and then data corresponds with the gathering stage, information with the processing stage, intelligence with the analysis stage, and finally there is the stage of dissemination of the final analytical product. So within today, as we are exploring the topic of data leaks, we will start with some very basic examples of identifiers, all of those related to different jurisdictions from different parts of the world, and how those can be leveraged. We need to highlight that data leaks and data breaches are currently a global phenomenon. There is a standing debate between some people within the OSINT community as to whether consider them OSINT or not. Our opinion, and my personal opinion, is that they can and should be considered OSINT, as they are now not some kind of clandestine source. It's a very publicly available type of data. So let's start with the emails that we have here. And let's apply searching records for leaks. Now let's do the same for the phone numbers. And the same for the three handles that we have here. While this is sample data, all of this is related to real people, real organizations, and real cases, but not our cases, because those would obviously be NDA. They're taken as samples. So here we start getting some results. Within the context of the product that we are currently using in this presentation, we can explore those results within the navigation subpanel or within spreadsheets, which is another mode of representing data within SocialLinks CRIMEWALL, where we can see the rows dedicated to different types of points. That data can be further extracted into separate objects and serve as a further pivot point. For instance, in this case, let's take the Facebook ID. That is a very common type of data leak or data scrape. And then from the ID, we go to the actual account, which is something that we can work with further. Or in this other instance, what we see is a specific name and an email address. Or in this other case, let's ungroup the elements. We can see a postcode, a full name of the individual, a previously used IP address, and some other pieces of data within the other leaks which we have. So part of this, in the case with this individual, is related to cryptocurrency, and part of this is related to gambling. We can see the portions of the last characters of passwords also in a dedicated field. That is something that we will pay more attention to closer to the end of the session. That is a very interesting point in general. And this is what we've got just with data leaks. Now, we can apply the other standard methods. Yes, I'll just make sure with my colleague. Yeah, the sound is good. Everyone can hear me. So now we further proceed to choose the different methods available here to enrich those identifiers to discover further pivot points. Social media accounts with other things that can serve as identifiers, such as imagery or screen names or handles. In the case with handles, there will also be some accounts in ecosystems that are commonly referred to as the dark web. And we can further deepen and expand on any of this, depending, again, on the specific objective and the specific intelligence requirement that we have at hand. If we see that there are mixed values and properties for a specific output from data leaks, we can extract all of them using those fields very comfortably. And then if there are duplicates, we can merge them automatically in case they did not merge initially. If there are Google IDs that we have discovered, particularly based on the emails, we can further extract the reviews. If there are Telegram accounts and we have historical data available for that region or country, that's something that we can provide to our law enforcement clients. We can further try to go to the Telegram groups the individual is related to and the groups that they have previously communicated in. And also we can utilize facial recognition to identify accounts likely belonging to the same person based on searching from their face combined with their name or their handle. And this is the first simple example that we proceed with within today's session. Now, in addition to data leaks and to standard social media sources and standard methods of processing that data, we want to have as many publicly available sources as we possibly can, including those that may be somewhat niche, non-standard, serving a specific type of use case, such as a language learning platform or a gaming marketplace or a payment processor. So here, none of those people are related to any kind of controversial cases, and we're using that without revealing personal data just to show how what can be extracted from those types of accounts. For instance, we have a YouTube profile of somebody who prints a 3D who uses a 3D printer to print guns. Also, that phenomenon is known as shadow guns, particularly in Western countries. And the channel itself is quite cool. We have here a PayPal profile of a person who was historically very engaged in the DEF CON community and in US hacker in the old sense of that word communities, who is an internet artist and historian. Here we have a Twitter account of a famous writer, the book of which Cryptonomicon and Snow Crash we recommend to everybody interested in the cyberpunk genre. The concepts of cryptocurrency and metaverses, for example, have been introduced there quite a long time ago. VK is also another region-specific platform that we can work with, very similar to Facebook in its functionality and good for social network analysis. Skype is one of the obvious sources, especially when we're looking at identifiers, so phones, emails, and handles. We can run reverse image searches from the image if it's there, and particularly if it's somewhat unique, and we can extract some metadata in a broad sense of that word from the account itself. Steam, a widely known, of course, gaming platform and marketplace, or marketplace with internal marketplaces within some of the games that has a lot of social media functionality as well. Here we see a personal account of a game developer, which is somewhat rare. And we further can proceed to look at the friends, groups, and inventory items of that account. In this case, we have GitHub, which of course targets a specific audience of certain kinds of professions. And we're just making a friendly reference here to Mr. Royal of Temming, who has offered many great intelligence and investigative tools, particularly including Maltego in the past. And one of the things that he's currently working on is Vortimo. And here, for instance, we can see the repository for that project, and we can try to look at who is subscribed to that, look at the forks, look at the likes, contributors, and content. So again, functioning very much like a social media and with capabilities from an OSINT perspective for social network analysis. Telegram is one of the sources that is quite relevant in the field today. We can identify an account by a handle or a user ID. Particularly, this person is a very qualified OSINT specialist who has a project on GeoInt and GeoInt vulnerabilities enumeration list, from what I believe what is the abbreviature. So if anybody is interested, in that kind of investigative work, very much recommending the projects available. And there's a link in that Telegram profile as well. And yes, another example is Duolingo, where we can also extract the details such as the languages that the person claims to know, the languages that they have been learning on the platform, their followers and followees. All of this can be a characteristic of the person in question. And it's important, of course, always in OSINT and intelligence work to correlate the things that we identify in one source with the things that we identify in other sources to build a coherent, holistic picture. For instance, here we have the listed languages, which include Spanish, Chinese, and Arabic. Here we have a PayPal account with the same handle that has a face. And when we get the result in the form of an Instagram account, there will be written in the description of that person's profile that they speak Arabic and Spanish, among other languages. So that, and also there will be the same username we see in PayPal, which is different from the username in Duolingo, which may lead us to a conclusion that all of those accounts belong to the same person. So this is how we can work with different types of platforms. And this is somewhat out of the context of data leaks, but also very relevant for an OSINT perspective. Now, in addition to social media, we have been referencing dark web in today's session. There are different ways to look into those kinds of spaces. We can search, and this is widely available in many different types of tools, and particularly in ours, from keywords. Let's say search for posts and products containing a particular keyword. In our case, we can also search for location. For instance, let's search for all of the products shipped to, designated as being shipped to or from New Zealand. We can pivot from a handle. This particular handle used to belong to a person that was recently de-anonymized and arrested by Western authorities, who was running a DNM, darknet marketplace. And cryptocurrency addresses are also one of the possible inputs, and it's also one of the types of entities that can be present in leaks, as we will see now when we receive results. Let's group those elements. Yes, I can see there's a question about Telegram. We will elaborate on that closer to the end. Very good question. Thank you. Yeah, so for example, here we see a leak, date of discovery 2015, cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, source breach name blackmarketreloaded.onion, which was an old marketplace. And here we see the handle in that same record. And from that handle, we can potentially pivot further. It is a vendor specialized in their case on a particular type of cannabis. Which we can see here. And yes, we can further examine the findings that we have obtained with all of their metadata in a broad sense of that word. So the imagery, the different fields, shipping specifics, payment data, and so on. Now, we will also focus a bit on the topic of Stela logs. So to understand how we can work with Stela logs, and it's a very useful thing in many kinds of investigations, not just focused on cybersecurity assessments, those types of use cases, CTI, and so on, but for more conventional OSINT investigations as well, we need to understand what is infostealers. So with infostealers, what is that? That is a type of malware. Basic characteristics: Trojan, It's usually a Trojan kind of model, something targeting sensitive personal or corporate data, and evasive and adaptive. The current famous examples are, for example, the Vidar info stealer, also Raccoon and Red Line. The last one, I think, was their operations were partially, well, at least of the developers, disrupted recently. What are the implications of Stealer logs as an operational tool of threat actors and for the cybercrime ecosystem? So compromise of credentials, very serious kind of thing in itself. Major privacy intrusion, so up to taking all of the available hardware data of an infected device. And on a more global, on a more macro scale, this signifies a shift to a more open, more approachable, and more inclusive malware as a service model. Which, so that was something that was noted by analysts within the evolution of the ransomware type of ecosystem. And yes, a similar thing can be said about Stealer logs. Possible countermeasures, of course, to highlight that, that would require a whole separate webinar. But for the more conventional and general ones, cybersecurity awareness training within organizations, threat hunting. So what is known as threat hunting is the process of proactively assessing threat actors and their networks and trying to identify patterns in their behavior and where they will go in the foreseeable future, in a broad sense of that word. And proactive monitoring of one zone infrastructure. So here we have some examples. Those are domain names, and with email addresses on those domain names found in existing Stealer logs. In one particular case, city administration in Buenos Aires, in another one, International Airport in Auckland, New Zealand, in another one, Atomic Energy Authority in Pakistan, a major research institution, DARPA, having the least out of all of those, but still, Hong Kong Stock Exchange, hydroelectric dam in Brazil, which can also be considered ICS, and a big hospital in Portugal. Now, if we examine those, possibly we'll blur that on the recording, but we will make available. Here's what those fields would look like. So here we see last characters of passwords, but that means that people who actually have access to this on dark web marketplaces have the full passwords. The network user agent, methods of password encryption, classification of the specific source, and also all of this implies that there are endpoints, that there are actual devices within the infrastructure of each of those organizations that either are currently likely infected with malware, because in some cases the discovery dates are very, very not that far back in time. For example, in 2024, in the last couple of months, or in 2023, or have been infected at some point in the past. As we have highlighted before, this type of malware is characterized as being evasive and adaptive to different kinds of countermeasures. So another thing that we will show, not because it is directly related to the topic of using data leaks, but it is related to data leaks as a phenomenon, and we also show it because it's cool, is usage of natural language processing and analyzing public discourse. Here we start initially from a hashtag data leaks to identify a test batch of tweets containing that specific hashtag. Yes, and also my colleague is urging me to take a brief pause for a poll. So there's going to be a poll now. And we would appreciate it very much if you would participate and answer. Let's take a minute's break for that. Question 1. Are you planning to implement OSINT solutions at your org, would you like a free trial to try out the solution SL CRIMEWALL, which you currently see, and assess how it can potentially help you? What's your role in the organization? And if you did not provide your business email address during registration, please fill out the form. And we sincerely hope that you are enjoying the webinar and finding this at least somewhat insightful. So yes, coming back to our content here. We can see here, if we go to map view, which is another beautiful thing which we're showing today, the geographical distribution of the users within this test batch of tweets discussing that particular topic. So we see quite a bit of those in India, which is known for having an abundance of information security professionals hailing from that country. We can see quite a bit in Western Europe, one instance in Nigeria, and also a lot in the United States. And we're keeping in mind that this is all just Twitter, of course, and just a test batch. Now, if we come back to the graph representation of our document, let's say we want to highlight a specific kind of sentiment. So everything that is categorized as negative. So we did that. We highlight those elements. And this is how we would see that within a spreadsheet. So that may give us some perception of what people are mad about or what people are happy about, on the other hand. Now, if we sort it in another way, we can see here that the tone of voice is predominantly negative. Or no, at least if we apply this, that yes, negative is definitely much more prevalent than positive. And we will also briefly touch on the topic of threat models, which we did not discuss on our previous events for a few minutes. And yeah, I see another question. We will come back to that soon. So a threat model, those are words that of course, they are somewhat more associated with information security and cybersecurity, intentionally splitting those two definitions. The second is part of the first, of course, and also in a national security LEA type of context, but applicable to many different kinds of intelligence and investigative work, any kind of work that touches on that in general and has that component. So the base questions that were formulated in what is known as the Threat Model Manifesto, those people were, I think, the same people who did a lot of work on the STRIDE framework, which we will reference further. What are we working on? What can go wrong? What are we going to do about it? Did we do a good enough job? And there are much more the key terms than what we see here, but one of the things is that we need to define the framework in which we are working. We need to decompose the system in a broad sense of that word. So a system consisting of humans is also a system. A system consisting of many categories of components, one of which are humans, employees, protected people, and so on, is also a system, and audit of that system. Analysis of tactics, techniques, and procedures of potential threat actors, of potential malicious actors in a broad sense of that word. So, for instance, if we're talking about a boutique security firm that caters to high net worth individuals and public people, that would be the profiling of this making a social demographic portrait of a potential stalker or a potential attacker and so on. And assessing risk, because we split here the definitions of threats and risks. So a threat is something that can happen based on all of the work done in those categories, and the risk score is the likelihood of that happening, which we need to prioritize. And the purposes are to identify threats, prioritize threats based on the risk score, and counteract, which is more in the mitigation type of domain. Examples of notable frameworks include Stride, RAMCAP, and Mosaic, each of which are very interesting. And in case, well, particularly for those who are just starting out in the industry, we have that audience on our webinars quite often, which is very good to know. You might be curious about those things. So yes, that was our webinar for today. We have highlighted our understanding of universal intelligence logic. We did some examples of how we can work with people based on their people-focused investigations based on their personal identifiers and how data leaks are leveraged in that. We have highlighted the importance of working with miscellaneous sources and some of the specifics of some of those sources, what can be done to research dark web platforms, what are logs, and perhaps a threat model can be applied within that context. Well, of course, it is applied, just highlighting that. The usage of natural language processing to assess public discourse, particularly in the topic of today's webinar, and the concept of threat modeling. So now we will answer some of the questions that we have in the chat, and we will be concluding the event. One that I see, access to Telegram. Is it a license intended only for law enforcement customers or also for commercial civilian customers? So that particular type of thing is something we only give to law enforcement and government organizations among our clients. So we do not provide access to that for commercial organizations or private individuals. What can you say about applying web crawler to retrieve leaked data from the dark web? That depends on how we define web crawlers. If we're talking about a preset method, a set of scripts, perhaps applied in a specific way to target data, to scrape data from sources which aggregate that leaked data. That is in general, I believe that is not very far from how the vendors specialized in that get that data in the first place. Interesting tool, we'll keep in mind. Thank you very much for your feedback. That's very valuable. Very interesting. How do I register? I believe that there will be some follow-up after the webinar. And if in general, if you would be interested in working with us as a client, in cooperating with us, perhaps on some research, on some public events and so on, if you would like to try our software, and we would be very glad, of course, for you to become a user of the software, or if you would like to receive training, then all of that will be available through the contact that you make based on the data provided in the follow-up. Highlighting another thing, we have recently released an official certification for basics of open source intelligence. It's called OCP1. We have quite more than we expected clients already for that, who are already studying, and some of them that have already completed the course. We highly recommend it to anyone who is either getting into the field or recently got into the field, or people that have been working in the investigative intelligence type of industry for a long time, but they did not interact a lot with the OSINT type of work. So that can give you a very, very comprehensive overview and can enhance your skills. We firmly believe that. Okay, so we hope this was informative and interesting to you. Thank you all very much for your time and for coming here. Thank you for the compliment. Very nice to hear. What would you recommend to international security students? I would like to answer that now, but that would take up a lot of time. Just write us and we can have a conversation. Yeah, thanks for your question. Thanks for your time. We hope this was interesting, and we're wishing you a good weekend ahead. Goodbye, goodbye.